Here is this atomic dog poster I put together. There is a lot going on here, so I've designed things in parts to show you how to bring it all together. So I zoom out here. Here are all the individual parts that I played around with and brought them all together in this atomic dog poster. So I'm going to break this down. This here was placed from Photoshop. Remember, when you're bringing photos in, you go File, Place, and you place them in here. If you're wondering how I got all these artboards, for those of you that are interested in more in-depth stuff, you can make multiple artboards inside of one file, inside of Illustrator. So if I want to make a copy of an artboard, I go to the artboard tool, press and hold Alt, and drag that around, and you can make copies of your artboard. That's how I've done all of this. What I'm going to talk about is setting up a color scheme for your photo. How did I set this color scheme up for the dog? So I'm going to pop into Photoshop. So here's my Photoshop document. I find all photo editing and anything photo filters way better in Photoshop. That's what Photoshop's for. So what I did here was I brought in this cute dog photo. I just went down here into the adjustment layers, used a levels like you saw right there, and adjusted the levels like that. I'm going to turn this levels on here. If you want a quick color scheme to something, gradient map. All I've done here is turn on a gradient map. Gone up in here, clicked onto the gradients, checked out some of these different gradients, blues, purples, whatever I want, and I can create a color scheme right away just with the gradient editor. So I landed on this blue tinted gradient, and I also liked this other red tinted gradient, and I just combined them together. I lowered the opacity here. So how that was made. Save that as a JPEG, brought that JPEG here into Illustrator. Boom, boom, boom. Now, how did I make the weird eyes and the weird nose and all this stuff with the dog? So when I place my object inside of Illustrator, I can go up here and there's this image trace option. And then I can have all these options up here. I can do line art. You can just check out different things. So I tried probably 6 colors here. So I use the 6 color option, and it's going to go and do its thing. And then it just vectorizes it, turns it into more of a vector art looking illustration right away. So to make these things shapes, I just hit this button here, expand. And now it's taken the photo and made shapes out of it. Then I can go to the white arrow tool, click off, and then I can go and shift select some of these shapes together, and then I could just go into the blend option. So if I go to Object, Blend Options, make some steps here, go OK, Object, Blend, Make, and check out what that does. Likewise, I could go to the eye, zoom in, and you go to the eye, select this shape here, select this shape here, Object, Blend, Make, and there's the weird eye. So you could try different shapes like that. What I didn't do for the final dog, but what you could try doing even when you have your shapes down like this, if you're looking at creating something strange and surreal, I could shift select these 2 things here, and I could try out an extrude and bevel, a 3D extrude and bevel on that, just to see what that would look like. And I could move that around. I could have done this as an option and go, okay. And there are some weird, surreal things you can do with the blend and the extrude options to a potential photo if you wanted to get experimental and surreal. The way that I could get rid of this background, I just went to the white arrow tool, clicked on these shapes, and deleted them. And that's how I did that. So then I wanted to make an atomic looking thing here. I'm going to make a new layer on top here, turn this one off. I'm going to go to the ellipse tool. I'm going to shift select the ellipse. I'm going to pick no fill, and I'm going to make a blue stroke here quickly. Then you can go to Object. So go to Object, Path, Add Anchor Points. If I click on the white arrow tool and click this, you can see the anchor points being added. Add anchor points. The next step is to go to Select, Object, Direction Handles. So I change those into direction handles. Then I go to the Scale tool right here, and I just pull the Scale tool, and then I can create an atomic looking design. If I hold the Shift key down, that changes it proportionally. What I've done over here is I've highlighted Appearance. So remember the Appearance window. You go to Window, Appearance. You can control your strokes. So if I want to double this stroke, I just drag it down here. Maybe make this bigger, make that 20. Okay, that's not happening because I don't have this selected. Select the object, make sure it's highlighted, go down to 20, there's the stroke, change the color. There's how you control strokes within strokes. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. That's how I created this. I picked a kind of this color scheme with these kind of pink, blue, fuchsia, purpley colors. So I stuck with my color scheme that I wanted and built off of that into this. The next thing I was playing around with was creating stars and different shapes around a circle. Now you see in the final, I ended up only using the stars. I edited some of it out because all of it didn't look good. But how do I create this? I use something called guides. So if I turn this on, you can see there's guides here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn this circle off. I'm going to make a new layer here. I'm going to drag it up here. I'm going to make another circle. You see there's a center right here in the circle. It tells me where the center is. But when I click off the circle, I can't see the center anymore. So I'm going to make a new layer here. I'm going to call this guides. To access your guides, you need to go view, rulers, and you need to show your rulers. So if I go hide rulers, you see the rulers are gone. View, rulers, show rulers. Then all I have to do is go to the black arrow tool, click on the ruler and drag in here, and then I have a guide. And then click on the side one, and now I have these guides in here. So now I'm going to select my circle. There's my center point. I'm going to grab my guide, and then I can just sort of click the circle and see that guide needs to come down a bit more. Click this guide over. I'm going to zoom in a little tighter. There you go. That will line up to that. This is not the most exciting thing, but that'll snap into place there. So now I know, thanks to my guides, the exact center point of the circle. It's going to become very important as I want to rotate things around the circle here. Now I'm going to make another circle and line that up right around there. Good enough. I'm going to make this a little bit of a different color so we can see it better. Remember, there's this rotate tool. So on the rotate, I want to move the anchor point, and I want to click down here. I know the exact center. So I'm going to click there, move the anchor point directly over the center thanks to my guides, and click there. Now this will rotate around the circle perfectly. If I start dragging and hold the Alt key down, there you go. I've now spread that out. If you hold Control D down on the PC or Command D on the Mac, it will repeat that. So that's the technique that was used to create the stars around the circle and the circles around the circle. Use these guys to find the center point, selected my shape, went to the rotate tool, clicked in the middle here, rotated around, and then hit Command or Control D to repeat that. The next thing I made was I really got into some gradients here. So I'm going to show you something called gradient mesh and freeform gradients. I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to make another layer here on top of this. I want this as my background, so I'm going to go to the rectangle. Tip is you pick the object, you want to go to object, and you want to expand. So just all you have to remember is go object and expand the object. So then I can go over here to this mesh tool once the object is expanded and click along the side, and I can start creating a grid of my liking. I'm clicking on the path. Now if I zoom in, there's that grid that's created. Then if I go to the white arrow tool, I can actually warp this shape if I wanted to in different ways. But the real magic is when I click on this anchor point here, you see I can change the color. Double click the anchor point, go over here, double click on the fill, and I can change that to a color that's related to my color scheme. I can go around, I can do that for all the points. And then I can also go and I can start dragging these around and doing different things like this. So I can create almost like an abstract or colored splash background. These shapes were created by using the freeform gradient. I'm going to show you that. Instead of using the pen tool, I'm just going to use a pencil tool and show you a couple of things. So I'm just going to go to the pencil tool. I'm going to go and pencil in a shape like this. Just going to go turn this off so you can see the shape a bit better. If you want to smooth, so the pencil, if you want to smooth some of these out, there's a smooth tool inside of the pencil tool. And I can just drag the smooth tool and it'll smooth some of these out. If you want to smooth some edges, you can just use the smooth tool. It continually smooths it out. Select this, throw on some random gradient. Doesn't matter. Go to the gradient tool over here. So you've got linear gradient, radial gradient, and here's your freeform gradient. Click it, edit gradient. You can basically add these points. And zoom in. Back to edit gradient, and there's these points here. And you see, you pick these points, double click, and you can change the color of that. So you can just go up to the point, click a point, double click, change the color. And then at any time, you can move these points around. You click the edge here, you can expand the gradient or make it smaller. You can create gradient lines by going here, and you can click it, you can make a line with the gradient. Then you can go into the individual points of the line, double click and change that color. So that's the freeform gradient. And eventually, with enough time, I did that with the gradient mesh, make it look like a splash of color, and then made these shapes and used the freeform gradient on them. How did I get these lines coming out of this shape? So I'm going to zoom into this. Over here is the width tool and all these tools. You could try twirling this thing. You could do that. The particular tool that I used from this list, I've torn this off and highlighted the tools over here. I used the bloat tool and pulled that around with the bloat tool. And the last thing I'm going to show you is a really good tip to play around with strokes and lines. So here I made this letter and then I put this stroke around it that looks really complicated, but actually is quite fast to make if you know what you're doing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make an ellipse tool, just like I did there. There is a stroke panel. So if you go up to Window, you will see Stroke. I have it open right here. I can go down here and simply go dash lines. I can throw a cap on those dash lines. Then I can actually create dashes and gaps. So I could go 5 here, and then I could go 10 here. You can play around with those numbers. And down here, you can switch this from uniform, and you can switch it to something where the line is varied. And you can play around with all these different things. I'm going to show you some finishing touches I threw on the dog. I'm going to turn this layer off. So if you notice, if I brought all those things over here, this is what the poster would have looked like. But I really wanted the dog to stand out more. So I put this layer on here. I'm going to show you how I did that quickly. So I did this rectangle. I opened up the metals gradient library, and I threw a metals gradient on it. Then what I did was, that's opaque. I went up to the window and into the transparency window, and I switched this from normal to multiply so you can see through it. So that's how this layer was made. The other finishing touch I did for the dog, you see the dog is just there. It's not standing out as much as the others because the stroke became an ongoing feature. So I thought I should put some sort of stroke around the dog. So if I turn this off, you'll see that I drew or quickly made a shape of the dog, and then just all I did was put a stroke on that quick shape there and kept that layer on there. And that's how I completed my atomic dog poster.